There is a white substance that costs $2 a pound and preserves any meat, any fish, and any vegetable for years without electricity. Not weeks, not months, years. The FDA confirms that when water activity drops below 0.85, no common pathogen on Earth can grow. Salt achieves that threshold with nothing but a bag of crystals and a bucket. Egyptian pharaohs used it to preserve food for the afterlife over 3,000 years ago. Roman legions marched across Europe carrying salt-cured pork on every campaign. Viking longships crossed the North Atlantic fueled by air-dried cod that lasted entire voyages without spoiling. The Chinese government controlled this substance so tightly that the salt monopoly lasted 2,600 years and funded entire dynasties. Then a $2 trillion processed food industry decided you should never learn how to use it yourself. They did not abandon salt preservation because it stopped working. They abandoned it because it worked so well that you would never need to buy their products again. A $2 bag of salt that makes food last for years cannot generate a weekly grocery bill, and anything that cannot generate a weekly grocery bill has to be forgotten. This is the story of the oldest preservation technology ever invented and the trillion-dollar industry that buried it under expiration dates and refrigerator subscriptions. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are the best way to make sure this knowledge survives. Now let me take you back to where this begins. Over 5,000 years ago in the Nile Valley, Egyptian embalmers discovered that packing human remains in natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture from the Wadi Natron Basin, completely halted decomposition. Bodies recovered for 70 days, the tissue dried, the bacteria died, and the flesh endured for millennia. The Smithsonian Institution holds Egyptian mummies preserved by this exact process, some of them more than 3,000 years old. But here's the detail most historians skip. The Egyptians used the same science on their food. The Egyptian word for preserving fish was identical to the word for embalming the dead. Temple officials guarded the techniques for salt curing fish as closely as they guarded mummification rituals. Tutankhamun's tomb contained preserved wheat, chickpeas, lentils, and dried fruit still intact after 33 centuries underground. And Egypt was not alone. By the 4th century BC, Rome had built an entire road for salt. The Via Salaria stretched 242 kilometers from Rome to the Adriatic coast. It predates the city itself. Roman soldiers carried salt-cured pork, called lardum, twice-baked hardtack, and garum, a fermented fish sauce so valuable that the finest grade from Cadiz in Spain sold for the equivalent of 2,000 loaves of bread per jar. Every Roman legion and every theater of war ran on salt-preserved provisions. Cross the North Sea, and you find the Vikings solving the same problem with no salt at all. They gutted fresh-caught cod and hung it on wooden racks in freezing Arctic wind for 3 months until 80% of the moisture evaporated. The result was stockfish, a protein source so durable it could survive entire North Atlantic crossings without spoiling. DNA analysis from the University of Cambridge confirmed that cod bones found in the Viking trading town of Hedeby came from Arctic Norway, proving long-distance fish trade over 1,000 years ago. In China, the government understood salt's power so completely that they made it a state monopoly in 120 BC under Emperor Wu of Han. At its peak, salt revenue funded more than half of Tang Dynasty government income. The monopoly was not abolished until 2017, making it arguably the longest-running government institution in human history. Every civilization with access to salt arrived at the same conclusion independently. Salt stops decay. That is not folklore. That is convergent food science discovered by observation across 5,000 years. But stay with me because the chemistry behind why salt kills bacteria is about to make the processed food industry very uncomfortable. When sodium chloride dissolves in the moisture on meat, it creates what food scientists call a hypertonic environment. The salt concentration outside the bacterial cell becomes dramatically higher than the concentration inside. Water rushes out of the cell through osmosis, the membrane collapses inward in a process called plasmolysis, and the bacterium dies. The FDA measures this effect using a scale called water activity, which runs from 0 for bone dry to 1.0 for pure water. Below 0.85, no common food pathogen can survive. Salmonella stops at 0.94. E. coli stops at 0.95. Even the dangerous Clostridium botulinum stops at 0.93. A saturated salt solution drives water activity down to 0.75, which is below the survival threshold of virtually every microorganism known to science. And here is the fact that matters most. As long as the salt stays in place and the food stays dry, that protection never expires. It does not wear off. There is no expiration date on osmosis. Properly salt-cured whole country hams from heritage producers have been documented lasting 3 to 5 years without any refrigeration whatsoever. Spanish Iberian jamin ages for up to 7 years. Salt cod lasts 2 to 3 years in storage. Salt does not degrade. Salt does not lose potency. Physics does not have a best-by date. So why has nobody told you this? Because the economics demand your ignorance. The global processed food market generates over $2.2 trillion a year. The 10 largest food corporations, Nestle, PepsiCo, JBS, Cargill, Tyson, and the rest, pull in a combined revenue exceeding $500 billion a year. Their entire model depends on a single elegant principle. Food must always be treated as a perishable product with an expiration date, never as something you can preserve permanently in your own kitchen. The average American family spends over $10,000 a year on food. The EPA reported in 2025 that the average American wastes $728 per year in spoiled food. A family of 4 throws away nearly $3,000 annually. That is food that went bad because it sat in a refrigerator too long waiting for a best-by date that has no federal regulation behind it. Only infant formula is legally required to carry an expiration date in the United States. Every other date label on every product in your grocery store is a manufacturer suggestion about quality, not safety. And 88% of consumers throw food away based on those dates. 3 billion pounds of perfectly safe food hits American landfills every year because of labels that mean almost nothing. A 50-pound bag of salt costs less than $25. That single bag can preserve hundreds of pounds of food for years without a single watt of electricity. Here's exactly what to do, and it is almost insultingly simple. For meat, weigh your cut precisely. Measure salt at 2.5% of the meat's weight. Rub it evenly over every surface. Seal the meat in a Ziploc bag with the air pressed out, or use a vacuum sealer. Place it in your refrigerator for 7 to 14 days, roughly 1 day per quarter inch of thickness, plus 2 extra days. This method is called equilibrium curing, and it is virtually foolproof because the salt simply balances to the correct concentration. You cannot oversalt. Shred a head of cabbage, weigh it, sprinkle 2 to 2.5% salt by weight, and massage it with your hands for 5 to 10 minutes until liquid pools at the bottom. Pack it tightly into a glass jar, weigh it down to keep everything submerged, cover loosely, and let it ferment at room temperature for 3 to 4 weeks. You've just made sauerkraut, the exact same technique humans used for over 2,000 years. The lactic acid bacteria drop the pH below 3.7, creating an environment where no pathogen can survive. Total cost for a full batch is roughly 50 cents worth of salt. Now, I need to be honest, salt preservation is not perfect for every situation. For cured meats, you must use curing salt, also called prog powder, which contains sodium nitrite. Pure table salt alone does not protect against botulism in low oxygen environments. Botulism? Toxin is odorless, colorless, and potentially fatal. This is not optional. If you are curing meat, use curing salt at 1 teaspoon per 5 pounds of meat. No more, no less. Salt-cured food will be salty, which is why it is traditionally soaked or rinsed before eating. Lipid oxidation will degrade the fat in cured meats over time. Realistic quality for most home-cured products is months to a few years, not decades. Do not confuse pink Himalayan salt with pink curing salt. They are completely different products. $2.2 trillion in processed food. Revenue depends on you never learning any of this. $10,000 a year in household grocery spending depends on you believing that food preservation requires a factory, a freezer, and an expiration date stamped by a machine. $3,000 a year in wasted food depends on you trusting a label that carries no legal weight. But this knowledge never disappeared. It was refrigerated out of your awareness and marketed out of your muscle memory. Salt does not care about brand strategy. Osmosis does not expire. And sodium chloride has never charged a subscription fee. If this video changed how you look at the food rotting in your refrigerator right now, the grocery bill draining your bank account every week, or the next blackout that turns your freezer into an expensive coffin, then subscribe and share this video now. Every share puts a crack in the wall they spent trillions building around knowledge that was never theirs to lock away. The next video drops soon, and what is inside is the one household item every camper throws away that could generate enough heat to survive a winter blackout.